On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome to a whole new week of On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be talking about the sky-high direct debits that energy companies are now demanding of households. Are they overcharging? Ministers think they might be and have launched an inquiry. Plus, should company bosses restrain their own pay when times get tough? That's the view of the campaigning think tank, the High Pay Centre. We assess the arguments. And an in-depth Money Talks interview with the boss of an air ambulance charity that serves Cumbria and Yorkshire. All that and more on the money after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's just 1 minute past 1. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, Russia's president claims the West was preparing to invade his land, and that's why he chose to invade Ukraine. Vladimir Putin made the comments as Moscow is holding its annual military parade today to celebrate victory in World War II. Well, speaking this morning, the UK's Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says Putin's actions in Ukraine are mirroring that of the Nazis.
Putin, his inner circle and his generals are now mirroring fascism and tyranny of 77 years ago, repeating the errors of the last century's totalitarian regimes. They are showing the same disregard for human lives, national sovereignty and the rules-based international system.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky had this to say last night in his address.
On the day of victory over Nazism, we are fighting for a new victory. The road to it is difficult, but we have no doubt that we will win. There are no shackles that can bind our free spirit. There is no occupier who can take root in our free land. There is no invader who can rule over our free people. Sooner or later, we win.
In some other news now, the Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis is meeting with the 5 main parties today following last week's historic election. We can find out more. Our Northern Ireland reporter is outside Stormont for us now. Doogie, good afternoon to you. What can we expect then from today's meeting?
Well, Brandon Lewis met the DUP about an hour ago in Belfast. They'll be coming back here to brief their new MLAs as to what's on the table. But really, they withdrew their First Minister's report here, or support, back in February, and all but collapsed this government because of issues around the protocol. They will not return until those issues are actually looked at, and because it is a mandatory coalition, this government will not be up and running without them.
Doogie, thank you. More on that as the meeting progresses today. Now, Labour's Shadow Health Secretary says Sir Keir Starmer is not ducking scrutiny by pulling out of an event later today. Wes Streeting defended the Labour leader against what he described as Tory mudslinging. It says Durham police are investigating an event that Sir Keir Starmer was at amid allegations he broke COVID rules at it in April of last year. Labour have denied any rules were broken and have not said why he pulled out of the speech. Universities Minister Michelle Donnellan told us she thinks Sir Keir Starmer's actions are hypocritical.
What's coming up in my own constituency is a sense of disappointment with the sheer hypocrisy that has happened and come about in terms of Keir Starmer's approach, having known deep down that there was more to this curry evening than initially we thought. You know, it does smack of sheer hypocrisy, and I can understand why my constituents are very concerned about that.
Polling expert Sir John Curtis told GB News there's mounting pressure on not only Labour, but also the Prime Minister over lockdown rules.
I mean, should it emerge that Sir Keir, in the judgment of the police, did break the rules and as a result he resigns, the pressure on the Prime Minister to resign, particularly if he were to receive another fine, would of course be very substantial. So in a sense, yes, this is for the time being put the pressure on the Labour Party and probably has caused Sir Keir not to make a speech today, but actually this could still rebound on the government if actually the judgment of the police were to be adverse for Sir Keir.
Sri Lanka is under a nationwide curfew after members of the ruling party attacked anti-government protesters in Colombo. The Prime Minister's offered his resignation in the wake of the demonstrations. Soaring prices and power cuts have led to protests amid the country's worst financial crisis since independence in 1948. At least 20 people were injured in violence outside of the Prime Minister and President's offices. Back in the UK, the boss of Scottish Power says more needs to be done to lower energy bills ahead of winter as prices are expected to go up again. Keith Anderson has urged the government to take action, adding that bills are due to rise by almost £1,000 for millions of households by next winter. The Prime Minister says Britain's town centres are to be given a new lease of life, with derelict shopfronts to be transformed. The idea is to help restore neighbourhood pride. The plans will be announced in the Queen's speech during the state opening of Parliament tomorrow. The Prime Minister says that the plans will give councils extra powers to force landlords to rent out empty shops. We'll bring you that as we get the announcements tomorrow. You're now up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Liam for today's On the Money.
And coming up on The Money today, are energy companies overcharging cash-strapped households, upping direct debits to shore their own balance sheets? Ministers are concerned they might be and have launched an inquiry. We hold a detailed discussion. Plus, the boss of a multi-billion-pound Scottish brewery launches a new profit-sharing scheme. So we ask, should bosses curb their own wages during this cost-of-living crisis and do more to help employees pay their bills? Again, On the Money looks at the arguments. And each day On the Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today we meet the boss of the Great North Air Ambulance, a local charity which responds to incidents in Cumbria, the North East and North Yorkshire. Having struggled throughout the pandemic, the charity now fears that rising fuel prices will hinder their ability to respond to emergencies. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? How do they impact you? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet @gbnews. I'll be reading out some of your messages later in the show, so do stay with us because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Now, ministers have accused energy companies of overcharging customers on direct debits to shore up their own finances as millions of households struggle with this cost of living crisis. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng has launched a crackdown following what he calls troubling reports that some providers are, quotes, hiking bills beyond what is required. Utility bills have spiralled over the last 9 months after energy regulator Ofcom increased the cap on what energy companies are allowed to charge households in October and then again in April. This reflects higher oil and gas prices on wholesale markets. From October 2021, the cap on the average household bill was raised to £1,277 a year. That cap was increased again at the start of April to £1,970. That's a rise of almost £700 a year, no less than 54%, affecting 22 million households. Since that April price cap was announced in February, war in Ukraine's pushed up oil and gas prices on global markets even more, given Russia's status as a major energy exporter. So it's almost certain that come October, when Ofgem resets the cap again, household utility bills are set to rise even more, just in time for winter. Keith Anderson's the CEO of Scottish Power, among the UK's major energy companies. He foresees what he calls a huge increase in energy bills this coming October. Anderson says bills could reach £2,900 a year on average. When the cap is reset this autumn, another 48% increase from where we currently are. Anderson warns this autumn's energy price rises will, quote, hit incredibly hard, with a huge rise in prepayment customers, in effect self-disconnecting, not reloading their prepayment meter because they can't afford to. The Scottish Power boss also warns of a, quote, massive increase in debt levels for direct debit customers. We're heading, he says, for a really horrible place where none of us want to be. It's against this background that Ofgem has launched its investigation into energy firms now burdening direct debit customers with higher bills, more than necessary perhaps. Ministers are talking of fines of hundreds of millions of pounds. Campaigners say the energy companies are indeed boosting their own finances, shoring up their balance sheets off the back of hard-pressed households. The providers, they deny wrongdoing, but ministers have given them just a few weeks to provide data justifying how much they're charging households. And that's our on-the-money question today. Should UK energy firms be fined for overcharging? Grown-up conversations with people who know their stuff, conversations that matter to you. That's what we do here on The Money. Today I'm talking to Angela Knight. She's former Chief Executive at UK Energy. She is a former Treasury Minister. Greg Marsh, the CEO and founder of Nous.co, joins us in the studio. That's a service that helps UK households manage their finances through this cost of living crisis. Greg, you're welcome. And in the studio, friend of the show, Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economics and Business Research, Vicky Price. Vicky, great to have you with us. Let's talk to you first, Angela. You've been a Treasury Minister. You've seen power at the highest level. Kwasi Kwarteng's launched this review. Keith Anderson's hit back, a very prominent figure in the power utility, household utility world, with some pretty hard words this morning. What's going on?
Well, first of all, what is going on is we've got a problem, haven't we? All of us, whether you pay at the cap or whether you pay more at the cap, because we can see that energy prices high and may well go higher. After all, another way of looking at Russia versus Ukraine is that one of the world's largest energy suppliers has invaded one of the world's largest food suppliers. So we've got some real problems as a consequence of that. But I would suspect that the way that Keith Anderson has constructed his remarks is he's having to look ahead at what he at Scottish Power is paying for gas and electricity in the autumn and the winter, because, as you know, the major power companies forward buy in order to be able to give some comfort that whatever you're paying can remain static for some time. Meanwhile, what Kwasi Kwarteng is doing is he's recognising that there's a lot of energy supplies out there and a lot of concerns with people. So getting everybody together, doing an investigation is indeed the right thing to do. As to whether the outcome is going to be anything other than confirming that there are some high prices to come, I'm not sure. And so what I hope that the government is going to do as well is, first of all, look at some of the other costs that are being placed on the bill. We've talked before about the green levies, and that is one item. But there's also other items on the bill, such as we're now paying for those energy companies that went bust, and I'm not entirely sure that that's right. But I think look at those other items on the bill and decide whether or not we really should be paying them at this moment, or whether this extraordinary situation in which we're in means, A, that some of those things are simply detached from the bill for the time being for everybody. And then, as I said before, Liam, those who are in the lowest and most difficult financial situations, they do need to get some extra help. And I sincerely hope the government will do that in the autumn.
Greg Marsh, let's turn to you. Now your company helps people deal with their energy bills. This is really an extraordinary time. I've been covering economics and business for, the best part of 30 years. I mean, some people could say these words from Keith Anderson, they're almost alarmist, but clearly the guy knows what he's talking about. He's clearly saying to the government, look, you really need to do something to help us, the day before a Queen's speech. And the government, meanwhile, is saying, well, you guys need to stop potentially overcharging people with direct debits. We want to see your data. This is a real clash of heads.
It is, and you can see why on each side of that discussion the parties have taken the roles, the views they've taken. Energy companies want to try to get as much cash out of consumers' pockets as possible while they still can. I think they're very worried about the prospect that a lot of households are going to struggle to pay their energy bills as the year goes on, potentially as prices go up a lot.
But households are worried that if they pay up front, as it were, they won't get that money back.
Exactly.
I mean, the GB News inbox, my own personal inbox, is full of viewers, listeners, readers of what I write saying, my energy company won't give me my money back.
We saw this, the real horror show play out when Avro, the energy supplier, went bust last year. They had taken a lot of cash from consumers up front, and it was very hard for households to get that money back again. Some are still struggling to. So you can really see why, from a household's perspective, which is where we're interested as NOUS, we're focused on, is this fair? And we tend to take the view that actually many energy companies are being very cheeky indeed and taking as much as they can as quickly as possible now that prices have gone up. Now, the way they make the argument, the way they justify what they're doing, the energy providers, is they say, look, we try to flatten out your consumption over the year. So you might have higher energy bills in winter and low energy costs in summer when you're not heating your home.
We're taking your money now for your own good.
We're taking your money now. Now, is that how most householders feel about it? No, most householders are really feeling the pinch. And we've seen some of the data that's come out recently from the Office of National Statistics and from Citizens Advice about just how badly some households, especially poorer households, are feeling the pinch. So should there be government intervention at this point? There probably should. There should certainly be really close scrutiny of the energy companies right now to call out the companies who are being opportunistic and taking more than they absolutely need to out of customers' bank accounts.
Vicky, you've worked at the top of Whitehall as co-head of the government's economic service. You will have been in the room with many really tough policy debates. This is a real conundrum here. You've got the head of Scottish Power saying this autumn there's going to be another huge increase in our energy bills as we go into winter. No sign of any end to this war in Ukraine. No sign of the OPEC energy exporters cartel saying, oh, don't worry, Western countries, we'll rescue you and pump more oil and pump more gas. This is a difficult one.
Well, absolutely. And of course, we've seen what's happened to the forecast for growth. So the Bank of England last week raised interest rates. What did it say? Actually, the cost of living issue is such that people are going to reduce their consumption anyway. And of course, everything we've been hearing and talking about today will accelerate that, which means really that growth is going to be very low. And for next year, we're expecting a drop in GDP. And that is entirely, as far as I can see, due to the consumer switching their behaviour, if you like, focusing more on being able to pay and for energy and, of course, food, as we've been hearing from Angela Knight as well. Of course, I mean, the food crisis is a very important one. The question is, what can government do? And so far, they haven't done an awful lot. Yes, they claim they're helping the poorer, but it's interesting.
No extra help in Rishi Sunak's spring statement.
Exactly.
None for people struggling with their energy bills.
It's really interesting because there's been quite a lot of talk, and I know that it's been discussed in this panel before, about doing something about what we pay for renewable energy as part of our bills.
Because 25% of our electricity bills are subsidies for renewable energy, roughly.
But the interesting thing is that places like Germany, which of course is struggling hugely given the dependence on gas from Russia, the Parliament has voted to remove from the electricity bills that element which goes for renewable electricity.
And the Green Party in Germany is far more powerful than the Green Party here, right? I mean, it's been in government in recent years.
Well, it is now.
It's crazy.
So which is in the coalition they've got at present. So it's really interesting that this is the way others are moving, and we are way behind the curve.
Angela Knight, we're going to the break soon, but we've just heard from Vicky Price, a former senior civil servant. You were previously a Treasury Minister. What's your advice to Kwasi Kwarteng now? What's your advice to Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson?
You can't ignore this, and you have to take some actions. I suspect that they may be thinking, well, we'll just see how the summer goes along and see if some of the prices come down. And you can kind of understand that. But I do think that there is a real worry, there's real concerns, there's real hardship that's coming along with the big increase in energy prices, but also with cost of living as well. And so right now, my advice is take those things off our energy bills that you do not have to levy right now.
Scrap VAT on fuel. Scrap VAT on fuel. You can do it now. We've left the European Union. What are they thinking?
You can. You can.
Why aren't they doing
VAT,
that?
But it's not a lot. OK, you can take VAT off, but it's not a lot.
Angela, if you're paying £2,000 for your fuel bill and you're struggling, it's 100 quid. It's worth having.
Everything's worth having. Everything's worth having. Taking off the bill, the payment for the energy suppliers who've gone bust. And by the way, there's rather a complicated thing I'd like to add in, and which please ask some experts on this. But electricity is charged on a pooling mechanism. All the generators who are asked to generate put that electricity in the pool, and what the pool price is struck in frequent periods. And the last energy supplier in is always the highest price, and so really impacts the pool price. Now, we've got some low-priced electricity generation out there. Our nuclear and indeed our wind prices are down. It's gas that's up. So why not look at that algorithm that sets the pricing for that electricity pool, so you kind of start to detach away the cost of gas from infecting everything as far as electricity is concerned. Technical, but well worthwhile having a look at.
And meanwhile, much of our political and media class is focusing on birthday parties from 2 years ago. Angela, we're going to carry on this discussion after the break. It's a really important one for GB News viewers and listeners. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Do stay with me. We're going to be hearing more from my expert panel, and also we're going to bring GB News viewers and listeners into this conversation, people who are genuinely struggling with rising energy bills. Your emails are flooding in thick and fast. A hugely important discussion. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. It's 1:23 here on GB News TV, DAB+, digital radio and online. We are discussing, are the energy companies deliberately overcharging customers on their direct debits to shore up their balance sheets? This, as the CEO of Scottish Power, Keith Anderson, issues a blood-curdling warning of where energy bills are going this coming autumn. My panel is still with me. Angela Knight, let's just hear from you briefly before you go. You are the former CEO of Energy UK and a former Treasury Minister. In a nutshell, Angela, what's your advice to the Prime Minister?
Take the unnecessary things off the bill. Take away the green energy levies for the time being and anything else you can as well. Get the bill, £200, maybe £300 can be taken off each bill by not levying VAT, not levying green policies and some of the other things as well. That's what he's got to do. And then for the poorer people in society, give them a bit of an addition as well. Some of us can afford to pay the increase, but there's some things which really need to be lifted off the bill for the time being.
Angela Knight in New York, thank you for joining us. We'll hear from you again here on The Money on this subject. And of course, it strikes me that that 150 quid rebate on council tax and the other grants that the government were giving from April, or in April, as the Chancellor originally said, it's now from April. Lots of viewers contacting us saying that they're not getting those rebates already. Let's hear from a GB News viewer. George Wallace is a GB News viewer. He's struggling to heat his home. George, your electricity direct debit in April 2020 was actually reduced, but it went up again sharply in October 2021. And most recently, you've received a notice saying that it's gone up again. Your heating oil bill's also gone up by almost 400%. Tell us how you are coping with this cost of living squeeze in terms of your heating and energy. Tell us how you feel about the warning from the CEO of Scottish Power that there are going to be huge increases again this coming October.
Well, it is a worry. It's become a worry because of the levels of the increases. I always find myself just above the level at which you can get a bit of help with it for some reason, but there you go. But as for what the CEO of Scottish Power said, what will happen if they shove them up too high is that they won't get any money at all because people will just not be able to afford to pay it. So they do need to think about that. And my own energy supplier, which are apparently entirely green, they're still going up the same way as if they were having to buy their electricity from a gas-fired power station. It's a bit worrying. People are opportunist, of course. That's the nature of business. But they might shoot themselves in the foot if they stick them up too far to the point where a lot of their customers can't pay.
George, you're 81. You're joining us from northeast Wales. To what when you talk to your friends, fellow pensioners in your community, how big an issue is this among folk at the moment? Because it strikes me that among the political media class, they still don't really feel that this matters. There's such focus on, parliamentary shenanigans and Partygate and all the rest of it.
I haven't, to be honest, noticed a great deal of worry about it from my friends and neighbours or from the family. They've got other things to worry about, I suppose. The war in Ukraine seems to be top of the bill nowadays. But everybody is slightly concerned about it. But it doesn't appear to be at the top of their concerns at the moment. And I can't understand that, really. It's the most important thing. I know it gets lost in the trivia of Partygate and other things which are so much more important for the government to concentrate on. But it would be so easy for the government to help us. So easy. Get rid of the VAT, get rid of the green levy, and most of the problems have gone away. The situation is inevitable.
That's really affected the extent to which you put on your heating. You're wearing a lot more clothes in the house and so on. I guess there's going to be a lot more of that for you in October, as and when, if the CEO of Scottish Power is right, there's another, quote, huge increase in your utility bill.
Yes, it sounds like it. And we're okay. We've got the warm months coming on at the moment, and I am lucky in that I get free logs from the farm here if I go and fetch them. But yeah, I can see next year possibly I might invest in one of those thick quilted flying suits and sit in that. Seems stupid, doesn't it? But you know, you've got to plan for the stupid in a situation where our political masters appear in that vein. You know, it doesn't matter to them. They've got loads of money.
Stay in touch with you and hear from you and other GB News viewers and listeners as this debate unfolds. Greg Marsh, let's go back to you. You are from NOUS, which is a service that helps customers to deal with their utility bills. Interesting from George, he thinks quite a lot of his generation so far are in a bit of denial.
It's exactly what our surveying is telling us. Yeah. That only one household in 20 is currently really confronting how serious this problem is going to be. The vast majority of households are still imagining this is someone else's problem. And that, for me, is the terrifying thing. We've only begun to feel the pinch. So folks like George, who is really suffering already, it's going to get a lot worse for many households, even before October. Just to give you an idea, Liam, we're literally having customers get in touch with us to tell us that they are feeling suicidal. Yeah. They don't know how to cope, that they're having to make decisions about whether to heat their home or feed their children. That is how serious it is for the poorer households already. And the tide is rising. It's going to get much tougher, even for households who've historically not had to make these kinds of hard decisions.
And we're getting lots of communication from GB News viewers and listeners about standing charges going up. Why are standing charges going up? That's sort of to pay for the infrastructure, isn't it? The plumbing, if you like. But that's been paid for many times over. Yet they're telling us that their energy providers are increasing the standing charges as well as the charge for the energy itself.
Look, I mean, what we're focused on as a business is what can you do as a consumer? So we can all call on government, we can all call on companies, but as an individual householder, what can you do? And the short answer is there's not a lot, but there's some things. So the step one is if you are paying more than you're expecting as part of your direct debit, you may be able to call your energy supplier and get some of that money back. So if they've built up a balance on your account, you got in touch with them. You have
be
to wait
persistent,
on the phone,
be determined.
Be persistent.
Don't take no for an answer.
And if they don't do it, raise it through Ofgem. They have a free ombudsman service. Okay. They will investigate and they can challenge it on your behalf. Now, I know that's a lot of work, but for £100 here and £200 there, it's work that's worth taking on.
And briefly also check whether or not you're eligible for benefits. Vicky, I do want to give you the last word. You've followed public life in Britain for quite a few years, if I may say so, with all due respect. Does this feel like the 70s to you? It feels like the 70s to me.
Well, with the increase that we're seeing right now, then yes. Of course, we haven't seen quite the sort of double-digit or in very high numbers inflation that we saw.
That's what the Bank of England's predicting now, though.
Well, yes, but not as high as 25 or 29%. Sure. So, I mean, that sort of a period is not coming back. At least one hopes so. But I think that quite a lot of people right now think this is temporary. It's one of the reasons why they're not reacting the way that you'd expect them to. So, and indeed, there is so much uncertainty. If you look at some of the forecasts out there in terms of increases in energy prices next year, they're very low, if not showing a drop. And it's also worth remembering that those energy prices have gone up from very low levels before. That is, of course, what you pay in the market. For individual electricity bills and household bills, yes, there were times when people were getting some money back, as we heard in your previous interview. But of course, you know, what's going on right now is that they're not anticipating that that's going to be the case again, not for quite some time, and there is the extra cost. I mean, the real question is, what do you do with your energy market in the future? Yeah. I mean, the previous government, and this government has facilitated it, encouraged quite a lot, and the regulators, quite a lot of energy competition to take place. Lots of firms coming in. And it has cost, right now, the individual consumer an awful lot of money, just as we're hearing earlier from Angela Knight. So I think there has to be a new look at how the energy market is run and priced in the future.
Vicky Price, you're staying with us. Greg Marsh of NOUS, thanks so much as ever for coming in. We'll hear from you again in the future, I'm sure. Thank you also to George Wallace, GB News viewer and listener who contacted us. If you want to appear on the show, telling us about issues with your energy bills, then do contact me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and put in the subject heading "On the Money," and we will pick up your email. In response to the claims that direct debits have doubled, British Gas insisted it does not recognise the figures, but said it was hard to comment without examples. It added help and support is available. And Shell Energy said the rises in direct debit payments, quotes, can in part be explained by the influx of accurate meter reads, which changes the usage on which we make the calculations. Well, we'll see what that Ofgem investigation comes up with over the next couple of weeks. We will be discussing that, as ever, here, because this is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, today's Money Talks interview is with David Stockton. He's the CEO of the Great North Air Ambulance Service. David will be telling us about the challenges facing his charity, which uses rescue teams to save lives across the North East and Cumbria. All that after the GB News headlines once more with Rosie Wright.
It's 1:34. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Russia's president claims he's fighting for the motherland as he defended his invasion of Ukraine. Vladimir Putin made the comments in Moscow's Red Square amid its annual military parade celebrating victory in World War II. Speaking this morning, the UK's Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says the Kremlin's trying to intimidate other countries during its celebrations today.
Putin, his inner circle and his generals are now mirroring fascism and tyranny of 77 years ago, repeating the errors of the last century's totalitarian regimes. They are showing the same disregard for human lives, national sovereignty and the rules-based international system.
The UK's Ministry of Defence has announced that more than £2 billion worth of defence contracts have been awarded to start now the third phase of its submarine nuclear deterrent programme called Dreadnought. Labour's Shadow Health Secretary says Sir Keir Starmer is not ducking scrutiny by pulling out of an event later today. Wes Streeting defended the Labour leader against what he described as Tory mudslinging. Durham police are investigating allegations that Sir Keir broke COVID rules in April of last year. Labour have denied any rules were broken and have not said why he's pulled out of the speech. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson said that action was required now from the UK government over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The DUP party leader spoke today whilst meeting party leaders at Stormont. The DUP has insisted it will not form a power-sharing executive until issues with the Northern Ireland Protocol are resolved. This all comes after the Northern Ireland elections. Our reporter Doogie Beattie will be keeping us up to date on this today. You're now up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Shortly, we'll be back to Liam for On the Money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money. It's 1:38. Now, the Scottish brewery and pub chain BrewDog has launched its first ever profit-sharing scheme for its bar workers. Boss James Watt is to give shares to 750 of his staff over 4 years, with plans to hand out nearly a fifth of his stake in the firm. With BrewDog recently valued at $1.8 billion, this could mean a nice boost for the Scottish brewery's employees. But will other companies follow suit? Well, polling from the High Pay Centre think tank suggests the majority of the public think executives are indeed paid too much compared to everyone else. Yet the difference between exec and staff pay in the UK remains large, with CEOs often paid 10 times and more than mid-ranking employees. Joining me now to talk about this is Luke Hildyard. He's the Executive Director at the High Pay Centre, the think tank which led this research, and Vicky Price is still with us. Luke, you're most welcome here on The Money. Tell us about your research and why you feel it chimes with the times in which we live.
Thanks for having me, Liam. Yeah, so we polled people on what they thought would be an appropriate gap between the CEO of a very large company and their a middle or low-earning employee. In reality, the gap when we last looked at it was typically about 70 times, i.e. the CEO earns about 70 times what
70 times
exactly
more.
What mid-ranking employee makes, and in quite a number of cases it was over 100 times, about a quarter of cases. Our research showed that the majority of people, over 60%, think that the CEO shouldn't be paid any more than 10 times the average employee. And I think it just shows a bit of a disconnect between our political and business elite and the ordinary working people. 10 times the average full-time UK worker's wage would still be a
350 grand.
Exactly, yeah. Quite a lot of money by anybody's.
Pay tax on that, of course.
Of course,
but still, it's a lot of money.
We hope they pay tax on it. A very good reward and incentive in lifestyle terms for taking on a demanding role with a lot of responsibility. And yet, if you asked a top CEO or more pertinently the board members that set the CEO pay, whether they thought several £100,000 was sufficient to attract and retain a top executive, they think you'd lost your mind. So I think, and I think it's very dangerous and potentially unsustainable for that disconnect between ordinary people's reality and what they think is appropriate for a way for a business to run itself versus what the business elite think. I think it sort of fosters anti-business attitudes which aren't going to be good for businesses in the long run. So I think they should heed the research and potentially adapt their pay practices accordingly.
Vicky, what can government do about this? It's up to, as Luke rightly says, the shareholders of individual firms, if they're listed on the stock exchange, to determine what chief execs and other senior executives are paid or aren't paid. Often you'd expect top executives to be paid in shares. So if what they do produces real value, wealth, generates prosperity for the company and everyone else, then they get lots of money. I don't think anyone in the UK would object to that. If you create a business and you fill your boots, good stuff, you're employing people. But in basic pay, 70 times, CEO pay is a lot higher as a percentage of average wages here in the UK than many other European countries, isn't it?
Oh, in terms of European countries, you're absolutely right. But of course, in the US, it's even higher. It depends, of course, on the sector you're looking at. I mean, what has been happening is that during the COVID crisis, there hadn't been very much investment in anything, of course, and quite a lot of companies struggled. There's no doubt about that. But anyone with any assets, so those assets increased quite considerably, and with very low interest rates, a number of firms did actually quite well. And they didn't do particularly well, like, for example, the oil companies, because they did something fantastic when the economy started to recover. They did it because oil prices went up very high and so on. Now, during that period, buybacks of shares were stopped. In fact, in a number of countries, bonuses were restricted, and also, of course, buyback of shares was restricted.
So a buyback, just briefly, is when companies use their revenues to buy back their own shares. That boosts the share price, and so executives then get their bonuses based on that higher share price.
Exactly right.
Rather than reinvesting the money, creating more jobs, more wealth.
Yes. So I don't think one should just focus on the basic pay. I think it's really what goes all around that matters. That's what gives you this enormous pay packages that we've got right now. And the truth is that shareholders have been complaining about this, but they tend to get outvoted by everybody else because, of course, everyone sits on each other's boards, and the remuneration committee has absolutely no interest in reducing the pay for somebody who they might be, if you like, competing again or against or being compared to when you're setting your own pay within your own firm, because it has become quite an international market. But this argument that, we can't get the best executives because now, they'll be pinched by some other country's board, and therefore we need to pay rates, has established a market which is very hard to penetrate and say, no, this is actually unacceptable.
Everyone's scratching each other's backs in the kind of magic circle, the winner's circle, if you like, and the rest of us, Luke, we just have to suck it up.
Well, I think there is an element of that. Everybody that sits on a remuneration committee that sets executive pay is typically a business leader, a financier, a former or serving executive.
So what do they need? Trade unions?
Exactly.
The odd journalist for a fee.
Maybe. I think you hit a good point with trade unions. Yeah. I think it would be very good to have a workers' representative who knows what's going on at the company, who has a bit of real-world perspective on what is and isn't a reasonable amount to be paid. And of course, the workers at the company, they want the company to succeed. They want their job to be protected. If, like Brewdog have done, they've got shares in the company, all the more so.
We should say Brewdog, they had a bit of adverse publicity, didn't they? They had some of their employees writing open letters to the bosses who, of course, deny wrongdoing, that they were being mistreated.
Indeed. And I mean, it's quite interesting that that they've now chosen to institute this profit-sharing mechanism. Yeah. You've seen companies like Sports Direct and Wetherspoons that have also had employee-related controversies introduce worker representatives on board.
Canniest business leaders, right? Mike Ashley at Sports Direct, you got Tim Martin at Wetherspoons. These are extremely politically astute business leaders with a high profile, right? So, I mean, look, we will get you back to talk about this because I predict in the coming weeks and months, the political atmosphere is going to get a bit testier with regards to these issues. But for now, I'm afraid, Luke, we've got to leave it there. We've got to do another interview.
Thanks
I'm really grateful to you for coming in. You're always welcome in the studio. And, of course, Vicky Price, our resident expert, the chief economist at the Centre for Economic and Business Research. Really interesting research there, I think, from the High Pay Unit. And that was Luke Hilliard, who is the executive director there. It's time now for some emails on overcharging energy companies. So many of you have got in touch about this. We're wading through all the emails. Here are just a few. Why don't we buy straight from the energy producers, says Christopher, and cut out the middleman? Also, scrap the green levies and VAT. You listening, ministers? Scrap the green levies and VAT. Fiona says prepaid customers should not be on a higher tariff than others. This is shocking and needs to stop immediately. I could not agree more, Fiona. We will be doing more on that here on The Money. Prepaid customers, of course, tend to be from lower income and more vulnerable households, and they end up paying more for their electricity. It's madness. And Linda says, I've just received my electricity gas bill for 1 month to 22nd of April. The previous month was £58.67 and the current one is £87.68. I live in a one-bedroom house on my own, so just normal usage. I didn't even have the heating on for part of April because it turned warmer for a few days. That's around a 50% hike. Who knows what it's going to be in this autumn if it goes up again. Thanks for those emails today. And remember, if you've been affected by high energy bills and want to share your experiences on the show, then please do get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk, and in the subject heading, put On The Money, and we will pick up that email. Now, it's time at 1:47 for my daily interview series, Money Talks. For the last 20 years, the Great North Air Ambulance has provided emergency services across the North East, Cumbria and North Yorkshire, an area of around 8,000 square miles. The service undertakes rescues throughout the region and over the last 2 decades has responded to no less than 23,500 distress calls. What an incredible record. It's staffed by 60 volunteers and the Great North Air Ambulance has no public funding and is reliant on donations. And before we introduce today's guest, let's hear about some of the work carried out by this incredible charity.
Hold on tight. We are here.
You've been hit by a train. I'm here to look after you.
Keeping you in safe hands.
I know, sweetie.
With your support, we can keep holding strong, so we can continue providing critical care to the North East, North Yorkshire and Cumbria.
Well, for those of you listening on GB News Radio, some really inspiring images there of volunteers rescuing people by helicopter, not least people who are out hill walking, a lot of rugged countryside that they cover. And I'm delighted to now welcome David Stockton. He is the CEO of the Great North Air Ambulance, and he is my latest guest on Money Talks. David, great to have you here in the studio. What an incredible organisation that you are part of. Tell us about how it started.
So thank you, first of all, for having us here. Basically, as you know, we're celebrating 20 years this week. So on Friday, it's our 20th anniversary. So it was started off, a gentleman called Graham Pickering, basically, and it was a very inspirational chap who's decided that the region needed some support, basically. So 20 years ago, basically from his bedroom and from his home, he helped to inspire people to be funding a Great North Ambulance, because as you said before in the intro, it is purely by the benefit of our supporters and whether they be corporate or private individuals who help us to do what we do.
You do cover some of our great national parks, areas of world-class scenery where I've often walked
as
a lad with my family, really amazing. But even we should say, even in the spring and summer, these are serious mountains and hills, and the weather can turn, and people, even experienced hill walkers, can get into trouble quickly.
Absolutely, yeah. A big part of what we do, especially on our Cumbria side, so we have one of our air ambulances stationed near Penrith, and that one is mainly to do that whole area that you're talking about, up the Cumbrian area, around the Lake District, and into Northumberland, basically in the hills. So you're right, we do sort of hope that people will turn up and basically be well equipped to do what they need to do.
Now, you need the thick end of £7 million a year, right, to turn over. The pandemic was obviously difficult for you. Yep. People, by definition, weren't out hill walking. Your finances took a turn. You still had to maintain the helicopters, even though they weren't being used. Extremely sophisticated pieces of kit. How many helicopters do you have, and how serious is your financial predicament now, David?
So we've got 2 operational helicopters every day. So we operate 365 days a year.
Amazing. All volunteers?
Volunteers and staff, so we have a combination of both. We have some paid crew, pilots, doctors, paramedics and support team. But yes, we have also a team of volunteers that help us on that journey as well, basically.
But no support from government, no support from taxpayers, all on charitable donations?
All charitable donations. So we get help from corporate businesses, basically, so those who can afford to. And it's interesting, I was listening to your article earlier on there, energy companies such as that. Some healthy money out there. Now, I'm not one to advocate who should spend their money where, and we're very grateful of any support we do get. But if anybody is in that position where they could help us, we along with many other charities, will be very grateful for the help.
So the pandemic did its thing to your finances of the charity, and now, of course, a big part of your running costs is fuel, specialist aviation fuel for your helicopters, which of course has rocketed in price. I mean, are you seriously concerned about the future of the Great North Air Ambulance, given where you currently are?
Well, I think it's right to be aware of it and to be concerned. We have had really generous support for all of that 20 years. So I'm not sat here thinking we're going to fall over tomorrow, but we do what we do by the grace of people's goodwill. So the costs themselves are one end for us, basically. So our increase in cost, our fuel's gone up about 3 times, electric about 5 times, I believe. So So they're down a cost.
Because you're not filling up at the local garage, are you? I mean, this is serious kit that you're using.
25,000 litre
helicopter fuel is very, very expensive.
But I guess the biggest problem for us is as people start to feel the squeeze and people feel that finances are tight, they have less money to be generous with, basically. So that's our biggest worry, because even the savings and the costs, of course, they're adding expenses to us, but our biggest one is our supporters. We're not like a retailer where we can go out and increase our prices or have a sale or whatever. Do you mean?
And here's the thing, it seems to me, you're right, as the squeeze comes in bigger, it gives me no pleasure to say that, but clearly it's happening to anybody who's willing to look. It may be that people, you know, do opt for the simpler, cheaper things in life for their recreation, like going for a lovely walk in the Yorkshire Dales or in Cumbria or in the Lake Districts or so on. So the demands on you may be even more at a time when your income from donations is being squeezed, David.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one we're very aware of, basically, going forward. So RTCs are our biggest area, cardiac arrest, which, again, all these things could affect you or I. There's no saving for that. Like you're saying, walking hills, climbing mountains, riding a bike, going for horse riding. They're all activities which could need our intervention at some point. So we're a service which could be required by all of us.
Just give a little shout out, seeing as we're here on national television, to your volunteers and your message to people who may be thinking about donating to you during these tough times.
So from my point of view, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. And I think you'll find that from each and every member of our team. Basically, we are eternally grateful and often overwhelmed by the generosity of people in their time, their money. We've got people leaving us benefits in their wills, based on legacy donations, which is a major part of our income. And I can't tell you how grateful we are. We read the letters every day of why people are donating to us. We have supporters. We have family members of people that maybe we haven't been able to make a difference to, but we bought them time, and they come and tell us how grateful they are for that. And also we have survivors come and see us, and they tell us, and basically that's what keeps us going. Basically, when we know the impact we've had, we know we've given somebody the best chance possible, and we've got many survivors out there who basically due to the efforts of the team that are out there. So that's a team basically which goes everybody from the volunteer to the supporter to the operational guys, the doctors, the pilots, the paramedics that go and make the difference on the end there. So it's a whole team effort.
And just in the last few seconds, David, of course, your charity does great work, but prevention and caution is even better than rescue. Just in a nutshell, your message to people who are venturing out into some of our more remote areas, beautiful as they are, they can also be dangerous.
They can really be dangerous. So please go prepared. Let people know where you're going. Have a plan B. Have an action plan basis to what you do from it. But by all means, if you need us, make that call. Basically, we'd be only too happy to help.
David Stockton, you are the boss of the Great North Air Ambulance. It's a pleasure to have you here in the studio. My latest guest here on Money Talks. What an inspirational charity there to end our show with today. That's all we got time for. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello again and welcome to the latest from the Met Office. I'm Aidan McGivern. Warm sunshine once again in the southeast, but generally cloudier skies elsewhere, and outbreaks of rain are now pushing into the northwest, Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, seeing those rain outbreaks push through during the rest of Monday. Eventually these fronts will slip south across the country, but for the time being, high pressure clinging close to the southeast, and so plenty of sunshine here, although some high cloud will filter in, turning the sunshine hazier, and the clouds are already thickening across northern and western England, Wales, with Scotland and Northern Ireland turning increasingly wet through the day. Some heavy rain in particular over the West Isles and the West Highlands. Not feeling very pleasant, 13 to 15 Celsius here, but we could see 22 or 23 degrees in the southeast ahead of the rain. The rain toppling south through the evening, pushing into northern England, Wales, eventually the Midlands. Although it is weakening, it's fragmenting. Showers follow the rain for Scotland and for Northern Ireland, but with some clear spells as well. A blustery breeze, lows of 8 or 9 Celsius in Scotland, 10 for Belfast, 13 to 15 Celsius for much of England and Wales. A lot of cloud, though, as we start off Tuesday. Outbreaks of rain, mostly light and mostly clearing through after about an hour or two. And then skies brighten behind the rain with plenty of sunny spells once again across much of the UK. But there will be some showers mostly affecting northern areas, especially Scotland and Northern Ireland, where those showers will be heavy, perhaps with the odd rumble of thunder and a gusty breeze as well. It will feel cooler, 13 to 16 in the north, 20 Celsius in London. And as we head into Tuesday evening, the showers tend to continue with some longer spells of rain possible for northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. Clear spells further south. Further showers to come on Wednesday, perhaps some longer spells of rain in places, drying up Thursday and Friday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the big issues that we need to be looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table and no one's going to get cancelled for saying what they think.